In June 2001, Rosario Porto and Alfonso Basterra were wealthy, educated, and well-connected, traveled to China to adopt a child. Porto, the daughter of a respected diplomat and university lecturer, was a successful lawyer. Basterra, a freelance journalist, had a quieter profile but a comfortable life. They lived in a grand apartment in Santiago's upper crust. On paper, they were the perfect parents. In China, they were handed a delicate 9-month-old girl with large eyes and a solemn expression. They named her Asunta. What followed was a childhood woven with academic excellence, ballet recitals, piano lessons, and private language tutoring. She was brilliant, so advanced she skipped a year in school. But behind the curated photographs of smiling holidays and glowing report cards, a darker undercurrent simmered. Porto's mental health began to unravel. She was plagued by anxiety, paranoia, and even spent time in a psychiatric facility. At home, Asunta witnessed the cracks widen. Basterra became emotionally withdrawn. Their marriage eventually crumbled in 2013, leaving Asunta tethered to two adults who had lost their way and perhaps their grip on morality. To the outside world, they were a beacon of modern parenting. But behind the manicured hedges of their upscale home, something dark was festering. The family dynamic deteriorated rapidly. Alfonso, increasingly isolated and reportedly passive-aggressive, was described as emotionally distant. Rosario, frustrated with his lack of ambition, began an affair with a wealthy businessman. The couple divorced in early 2013, but their interactions remained tangled and complex. Strangely, they maintained a semblance of unity around Asunta, occasionally even cohabiting again. And in this storm of emotional confusion, Asunta began to change. Teachers noticed her waning attention. Friends described her as unusually tired. She would sometimes appear dazed or groggy. The vibrant little girl was wilting. Investigators would later uncover that Asunta had been repeatedly drugged in the months leading up to her death. Toxicology reports confirmed she had been administered lorazepam, an anxiety medication in doses strong enough to sedate an adult. She had been unknowingly ingesting it for weeks. Her symptoms, fatigue, confusion, slurred speech were brushed off as stress. But her descent was not natural. It was orchestrated. One friend of Asunta recalled how the young girl confided she believed someone was trying to hurt her. A chilling statement made to a piano teacher revealed her suspicions that her water was being tampered with. But no one imagined her own parents might be responsible. The world around her was falling apart, but Asunta remained obedient and loving. On the surface, she was still the sweet, accomplished child. But the drugs clouded her brilliance. Something was happening, and Asunta sensed it. The problem was, she couldn't escape it. Asunta's final day alive, September 21, 2013, began with an unsettling calm. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like any other Saturday. The 12-year-old girl spent the afternoon drifting between her parents Rosario Porto and Alfonso Basterra, each taking turns with her as if rehearsing the day's events like actors in a twisted play. At lunchtime, Asunta dined with her father. Later, her mother picked her up and took her to the family's country house in Teo, a quiet wooded area outside Santiago de Compostela. The home, once a weekend sanctuary, would become her tomb. Neighbors would later recall seeing Rosario Porto's car speeding down the gravel path that led to the house, far faster than usual. No music played. The forest around the property, thick with trees and always slightly damp, seemed to press in that evening. There was a weight in the air, as if the woods themselves were bracing for something unspeakable. Asunta, according to toxicology reports, was already heavily sedated by the time she entered the house. Lorazepam and anti-anxiety medication coursed through her veins in quantities that could incapacitate a grown adult. Investigators would later discover that for weeks, if not months, Asunta had been quietly drugged, likely by her own parents. Teachers had noted her drowsiness, her dulled reactions in class, and her uncharacteristic forgetfulness. Friends remembered her stumbling through conversations, as if she was always waking from a deep sleep she could never quite shake. She had even written about it. In a school notebook, Asunta left behind a chilling confession: "My mother gives me white powder at night to make me sleep." The note was short, childlike in its phrasing but devastating in its implications. It would later become a crucial piece of evidence, the ghostly whisper of a girl trying to scream into the void before the darkness claimed her. The events inside the country home remain shrouded in ambiguity, as neither Rosario nor Alfonso ever confessed. But investigators pieced together a narrative from the evidence. Asunta was brought into the home, drugged, and as the sedative dulled her senses, she was likely suffocated. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. The murder, it seemed, was cold, calculated, and quiet. Even in death, Asunta had no voice. Later that evening, Porto drove back along the rural road towards Santiago. In the back seat of her car lay the lifeless body of her daughter. At some point during the journey, she pulled off near a curve along a remote road known as the AC841, a place bordered by tall trees and choked in darkness. It was there that she placed Asunta's body among the underbrush, a mere few meters from the road, as if discarding something no longer useful. Her hands, forensic experts would later note, bore faint scratches, likely from dragging the body through brambles. Around 1 a.m. a driver passing by noticed something strange. Pale figure by the roadside. Curious, he stopped. What he found was the lifeless body of a child, posed unnaturally, her limbs bent, her eyes slightly open. Police arrived shortly after. They were initially baffled. There was no identification, no sign of injury. Just a ghostly girl in an orange shirt, her hair still neatly tied back, left under a cloak of silence. At 2 a.m. Porto phoned police to report her daughter missing. Her voice was controlled, but curiously devoid of urgency. She claimed Asunta had gone to bed and vanished without a trace. She and Alfonso had even begun calling friends, part performance, part misdirection. But the police were already piecing things together. The timeline was suspicious, the gaps too wide to explain. Security camera footage showed Porto's vehicle traveling to and from the country house. Her alibi cracked like thin ice under scrutiny. Basterra's role, while less physically evident, was deeply suspect. Computer searches found on his laptop revealed unsettling terms: how long does lorazepam stay in the body, and dangers of overdosing a child. Witnesses described the father as unnervingly calm, even smug during police questioning. Autopsy reports confirmed the horror. Asunta had ingested at least 27 pills worth of lorazepam in the 48 hours leading up to her death. The dosage wasn't an accident. It was a slow descent, administered dose by dose, night after night. For weeks, her murder had been in motion, and yet she continued to trust those poisoning her. Her final hours were not violent in the traditional sense. They were something worse, quiet, calculated, and devoid of mercy. In the days following her death, Santiago reeled in horror. The country mourned the loss of a bright, gifted child, but what haunted the public more was the identity of her killers. These were not strangers, not burglars or kidnappers. They were the people who adopted her, who raised her, who posed as protectors. Behind the well-manicured lives and newspaper columns, behind the smiling interviews on adoption, there was rot. And Asunta, an intelligent, inquisitive, sensitive girl, became the ultimate casualty of that hidden darkness. Lies and revelation. Rosario reported Asunta missing just after midnight, a mere hour before her body was found. Her story was full of inconsistencies. She claimed Asunta had been home studying when she left for errands, but surveillance footage told another story. It captured Rosario with Asunta, drugged and barely able to walk, stumbling toward the estate. Alfonso's alibi began to crumble under scrutiny. Though he insisted he had stayed home all night, his cell phone mysteriously went offline during the crucial hours. Investigators would later piece together his involvement, suspecting that he may have supplied the drugs used to sedate Asunta. Public opinion shifted fast. At Asunta's funeral, whispers of suspicion surrounded the grieving mother. Friends who once praised Rosario's warmth now questioned her sanity. Those who admired Alfonso's intellect noted his cold, mechanical demeanor. The golden couple of Santiago had turned into monsters. The trial, beginning in 2015, captivated the nation. Prosecutors painted a harrowing picture, a premeditated plan to eliminate a child who had become an inconvenient burden. Whether out of desperation, resentment, or cold calculation, Rosario and Alfonso had conspired to murder their daughter. Rosario, now gaunt and unrecognizable, gave conflicting statements, often breaking into sobs. Alfonso, defiant and emotionless, denied everything. Yet, damning evidence stacked up prescriptions, search histories, and the timeline of events led investigators to a single, chilling conclusion. This was not an accident. It was murder. In a rare twist, the prosecution argued that both parents shared equal blame. Rosario, the executor, Alfonso, the planner. The court agreed. Both were sentenced to 18 years in prison. The full weight of Asunta's loneliness came to light. She had tried so desperately to tell the world she was in danger. A teacher recalled her once confiding, "If I disappear, it wasn't an accident." Another friend said Asunta feared being alone with her mother, but didn't know how to escape. She journaled about feeling invisible. She feared being sent to a boarding school abroad, a threat Porto had allegedly used to manipulate her. Some theorized this was Porto's plan: get rid of Asunta and reclaim her life without responsibility. Others believe Basterra, bitter and controlling, orchestrated the act for revenge after Porto's affair. Even now, years later, the case of Asunta Fong Yang continues to haunt Spain. It is the tale of a gifted child destroyed by those who once promised her the world. The betrayal is almost too cruel to fathom. Her final moments, a haze of sedation, confusion, and fear, followed by the cold pressure of hands around her neck. This was not just a crime, it was a slow erasure of a child's life. Thanks for diving into the shadows with me, you curious, twisted, and beautifully eerie souls. My name is Penny Flick with Kreep-ish. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and always remember, the truth is stranger than fiction.